When 1 out of every 25 people in your country is a millionaire, you know something extraordinary is happening. In 2023, Singapore was home to 333,000 millionaires, meaning about 4% of its population had a net worth of at least $1 million. On top of that, its GDP per capita soared past $82,000, higher than the United States, Japan, or Germany. When you think of wealthy countries, you might imagine places with vast oil reserves like Saudi Arabia, or giant economies like the United States and China. But Singapore is neither. It has no oil, no gas, not even enough land to farm or water to drink without importing. By all logic, it should have remained poor. Yet this tiny red dot defied the odds. Once dismissed as a poor tropical backwater, after it split from Malaysia in 1965, Singapore has transformed into a global economic powerhouse. So how did this happen? The answer isn't luck. It comes down to bold, strategic choices that change the nation's destiny. Let's break down the 5 key factors that explain why Singapore became so rich. Not the generic reasons you've heard before, but the real moves that set it apart. How Singapore turned geography into gold. Singapore had no oil, no gas, no gold mines, and no fertile land. But what it did have was location. Sitting right at the crossroads of the Strait of Malacca, Singapore is perched along one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. Today, more than 100,000 ships pass through the strait every year, carrying about 25% of global trade goods. But location alone doesn't guarantee wealth. Plenty of countries are in strategic spots but never became rich. What Singapore did differently was to turn its geography into gold. Instead of being just a pit stop, Singapore invested heavily in its port. The Port of Singapore became the world's busiest transshipment hub, where containers are moved from one ship to another. Even today, Singapore handles about 37 million TEUs or 20-foot equivalent units of container traffic annually, ranking second only to Shanghai. Think about it. Every time goods from China go to India or oil from the Middle East heads to Japan, there's a good chance those containers make a stop in Singapore. That's like being the world's middleman for trade and charging a fee each time. Compare that to Malaysia or Indonesia, which share similar geography, but didn't manage to build the same global hub. Singapore's ability to seize this opportunity was the first step in its rise to wealth. Singapore had zero tolerance for corruption. Now geography could get Singapore started, but it couldn't keep it running. Investors need trust, and that means clean governance. This is where Singapore stands out dramatically from many of its neighbors. When Singapore gained independence in 1965, many doubted it would survive. Most post-colonial states at the time were plagued with corruption, where government officials lined their pockets and businesses had to pay bribes just to operate. But Singapore, under Lee Kuan Yew's leadership, chose a different path. One of the boldest moves was the creation of the Corrupt Practices Investigation Bureau, CPIB, which reported directly to the Prime Minister. This meant no minister, no powerful tycoon, and no government official was above the law. And Lee Kuan Yew himself set the tone, famously saying, "If you want to fight corruption, you must be prepared to start at the top." The results? Transparency. International consistently ranks Singapore among the top 5 least corrupt countries in the world. In contrast, countries like Indonesia or the Philippines often rank much lower, scaring off foreign investors. This clean governance wasn't just about morality, it was a strategic economic tool. Investors from the West and Japan felt safe parking billions in Singapore, knowing their money wouldn't vanish into a black hole of bribes. In fact, Singapore attracted so much foreign investment that by the 1980s, it was hosting more U.S. multinational subsidiaries than any other Asian country outside Japan. Next, Singapore uses foreign multinationals as a growth engine. Here's where Singapore really broke the mold. Many newly independent countries in Asia took a protectionist approach, shielding local industries from foreign competition. But Singapore had no time for that. It had no industries to protect in the first place. So instead, it went all in on foreign multinationals, MNCs. In the 1970s, Singapore's Economic Development Board actively courted giants like Shell, ExxonMobil, IBM, and Hewlett-Packard to set up factories and offices on the island. The idea was simple. Let global companies bring in capital, technology, and expertise, while Singaporeans provided the labor, and learned new skills. This move turned Singapore into a magnet for investment. By the late 1980s, over 2,000 multinational corporations were operating in Singapore, employing tens of thousands of locals. One powerful example is the electronics industry. Companies like HP and Seagate established manufacturing plants in Singapore, which later grew into a high-tech sector. Today, electronics remain one of Singapore's top exports, accounting for about 30% of its total trade. Think about the contrast. While India spent decades trying to build local industries behind trade barriers, Singapore embraced globalization early, and it paid off. State-owned enterprises as global champions. But Singapore didn't just rely on foreigners. It also built its own state-owned enterprises, not as bloated bureaucratic firms like in many socialist countries, but as lean, globally competitive champions. Take Singapore Airlines, for example. Established in 1972, it didn't just aim to be a national carrier. It aimed to be the world's best airline. And for decades, it has consistently ranked among the top in customer service, innovation, and profitability. Or look at Temasek Holdings, the state investment company. Founded in 1974, Temasek now manages a portfolio worth over $300 billion, with investments spanning from Alibaba to Singapore's own infrastructure. Then there's PSA International, which runs ports not just in Singapore, but across the world, from Antwerp to Panama. By internationalizing its state-owned enterprises, Singapore turned its national champions into global players. This hybrid model, combining foreign MNCs with powerful state enterprises, gave Singapore the best of both worlds. It wasn't fully capitalist, nor was it socialist. It was pragmatic, and it worked. And finally, social engineering for stability. We can't talk about Singapore's wealth without mentioning something most people overlook: social stability. A country can be rich in resources and trade, but if its society is divided, riots and unrest can scare away investment. Singapore knew this well. In the 1960s, it faced racial riots between Chinese and Malay communities. To prevent future divisions, the government engineered policies that promoted harmony and stability. One of the most famous examples is the Housing Development Board, commonly known as HDB. Over 80% of Singaporeans live in HDB flats, and these public housing estates are carefully planned so that Chinese, Malays, and Indians live side by side. No ethnic group is allowed to dominate a block, which fosters daily interaction and reduces segregation. At the same time, by making housing affordable, the government turned most citizens into homeowners. This gave ordinary Singaporeans a stake in the country's stability. If riots break out or instability rises, it's their property values that fall. This kind of social engineering may sound heavy-handed, but it worked. While neighbors like Malaysia and Indonesia struggled with ethnic tensions, Singapore built a cohesive, stable society that made it attractive for investors. Singapore, from struggle to strength. So why did Singapore become so rich? It wasn't luck. It wasn't just being in the right place at the right time. It was about bold, deliberate choices, turning geography into a strategic advantage, building a government with zero tolerance for corruption, using foreign multinationals as growth engines, creating state-owned global champions, and engineering a stable, cohesive society. The result is a country that went from third world to first world in just one generation, something almost no other nation has pulled off. Today, Singapore is home to over 7,000 multinational corporations, one of the world's busiest ports, and a financial center rivaling Hong Kong and London. Its passport is one of the most powerful in the world, and its people enjoy a standard of living that's the envy of Asia. The real lesson from Singapore's story is that even the smallest of nations can rise to global power if they play their cards right. And in Singapore's case, the cards weren't handed to them. They were built, stacked, and played with unmatched precision. Now, what do you think? Do you agree with this video? Tell us what you think by leaving your thoughts in the comment section below. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more interesting videos.